All right. Well, thanks for joining us this early morning on a Tuesday. We really do appreciate that. We're going to have a presentation here from Sedgwick with Tony Sharrock and Rejeana Woolum-Napier. And not only do we appreciate them being here this morning, but a couple of other things are that if you would, during the presentation, type your questions into the chat. And at the end of the presentation, I do believe they'll be happy to take any other verbal questions if maybe you have something a little bit longer to discuss. But for the workman's compensation ratings plan, please take it away, Rejeana.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here today. So this morning, we're going to talk a little bit about workers' compensation rating plans. Right now is the time that school districts are looking ahead toward next year and weighing out their cost-saving options within their workers' compensation policy. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk a little bit about the 2023 program enrollment cycle and deadlines for that. We're going to highlight the group rating and group retro plans, and then we're going to finish up a little bit with COVID-19 claims and how that could impact the district. All right, so when you're looking at your workers' comp policy, what are your cost-saving options? The first thing you're going to look at is, will your workers' comp policy be penalty rated or credit rated? And that is going to be determined by your claim losses that lie within your experience period. So your experience period is going to be the oldest 5 of the last 6 years. So for right now, it's 2022. The claim years that are impacting your workers' comp policy are going to be claims that happened in 2016, 17, 18, and 19. So as we're looking ahead for next year's cost saving options, the experience period is going to change, and that 2016 rating year is going to drop off, and then we're going to add the 2020 rating year. So we'll be looking at 17, 18, 19, and 20. So as we look at those claim costs, go ahead, Tony.
I was just going to say, in rating year, I mean, that can be just another way of looking at it, especially for schools and public employers, that's calendar year. So if the date of injury falls within that specific rating year or calendar year, that's what Rejeana is addressing when she mentions that for the experience.
Correct. So January 1 through December 31. So as we're looking ahead at the enrollment for next year, we're looking at those claims that are impacting your experience from 2017 to 2020. And we're looking at, is the workers' comp policy going to be penalty rated or credit rated? Penalty rated employers are traditionally not eligible for the group rating program. Credit rated, you would be looking at eligibility there, and your eligibility could be for your traditional group rating or the group retrospective program, or at times you could be eligible for both. Third-party administrators will do an analysis of your workers' comp policy every year, and they would be able to identify what your options are going to be for that next policy year. And the time is right now that the quotes are going out. So third-party administrators are getting busy sending those out to you so you can see what your options will be.
Yeah, and realistically, I mean, most school districts, they're looking at a couple of group options, the group rating and the group retro, which is why we're spending most of this morning talking about that. Yes, there are other options that may be reserved for the really large school districts, whether that be self-insurance or individual retro, but those are so rarely utilized in today's world with rates as low as they are that it's group and group retro, and that's really what schools should be evaluating moving forward.
So we're going to start by talking about the group rating program. Under group rating, you receive an upfront discount that is based on your past experience or that claim period. In group rating, you are grouped together with other policies with similar experiences. Not all programs are created equal. You may, be eligible for one discount in one place and another discount in another place. So what we say generally, the larger programs are going to give you more discount options and more accurate estimates. And under the Ohio School Comp program, which is what we administer here at Sedgwick, it is a large program, and that is a combination of OASBO and the OSBA program together. to provide districts with the best possible saving options.
Yeah, so to that point, OSBA and OASBO, they are certified to offer group programs to the state of Ohio. Those two organizations merged their programs back together in 2009 under the Ohio School Comp umbrella. So if you're looking at any type of proposal or anything like that, if it says Ohio School Comp, that is really OSBA and OASBO's workers' comp program. And if I could just talk a little bit about group rating so that everybody understands what that means. When think of some of the other type of bulk purchasing that the district may do. No, group rating is not bulk purchasing, but it kind of follows that same concept. The more policies that we can get into it with similar loss history, the greater the savings is for those members that they can realize, not necessarily on their own, but under a combined situation. So with group rating, we're putting schools together that have the same type of losses. They're purchasing the workers' comp just like they always did from the Bureau, but they're getting it at a reduced rate. It's kind of along those lines. It's not exactly that, but that is ultimately what group does, where you're pulling resources to get a cheaper rate. And then we'll talk about group retro, which is a little bit different, but similar in nature, if you will.
It's like larger buying power.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so then we'll talk about group retrospective rating, which is a little bit different than group rating. Under group retro, it's a deferred savings program, and it's based on your future claims cost. I like to explain the difference between group rating and group retro, kind of like when you go to a store and you are buying a product that's on sale. Sometimes that sale tag represents the sale price at that moment. And then there are other times where the sale tag might represent the cost after the rebate. So you're going to buy it at its original price, and then you're going to mail in your rebate to get your money back. Group retro is very much like a rebate program. So what happens with group retro is you would enroll in that program on a one-year basis, and you will receive a review from BWC on the claims cost for that year, but that review comes in 3 increments at 12 months, 24 months, and 36 months after you started in that program. And at that time, you would be eligible for rebates or assessments, and that's determined on the performance of the group. So if the group as a whole did well, then you would be looking at a rebate. If the group had some claim losses that impacted them, you could be looking at an assessment. Tony, do you want to talk for a second just on the assessments and kind of the wager with that and where we put that for the school program?
Yeah, absolutely. So under the Ohio School Comp, and really this is just general structure when it comes to the public sector here in Ohio, the sponsor gets to choose what the maximum assessment is. And that can vary from 5%, I believe, all the way up to 200%. And basically it's general risk versus reward. And OSBA and OASBO, when the program came together again back in 2010, they set that value at 5%. So there was 5% risk. So if a program went south, you could get a bill for up to 5% of your workers' comp premium. And I'll cover what going south means. Well, fast forward a few years, we realized that 5% was not really high enough because we were leaving money on the table because the program was performing so well. And as this program continued to grow, and it's not just school comp, but we've seen this in other programs out there administered by other TPAs, as these pools continued to grow, it made sense for those organizations to take on more risk because the likelihood for a quote unquote assessment was small, but the likelihood for a maximum assessment going from 5% to 10 or into the current environment, a 15% maximum assessment is so unlikely that it just made sense because as we continue to take on more risk, that gives more refund potential to the program participants. So ultimately what happens, and I'll try to explain this as general as I can. Yes, there is a lot of massaging of the numbers that go into this, but you pay your premium, as does every other school that is in that program. the clock starts ticking 1/1 of that rating year, and all of the claims that are incurred during that rating year are ultimately added together and compared to the premium. Yes, there is, again, some massaging of that. There's some increase on the claim side. There's a little decrease on the premium because not 100% of the premium is eligible for rebate. Bureau still has to keep the lights on. But the reality is that if the claims cost is less than the pool of money that was paid, everybody gets a rebate. And that is done on 3 different times. So those claims continue to mature. That's why they're evaluating it 3 separate times. After 12 months, those claims definitely don't look the same as they do for after 24 months or after 36 months. So that's why the Bureau is doing that on 3 separate evaluations. So they'll do the evaluation, they'll send back the refund, or they'll ask for a little bit of money if the pool's upside down, and then they'll do it again year 2, year 3.
And claims cost is key here with the group retro program. So for us, as we're administering our group retro policies, we are taking a close look at that claim activity and closely monitoring the claims cost for those policies that enter into that group retrospective program.
And really all TPAs are doing that. I mean, right, Rejeana? I mean, when a school district contracts with a third-party administrator to handle their workers' comp for them, they're buying whatever the program is, but they're also buying the claims management that comes along with that. Now, there's some TPAs out there that are a little bit a la carte, where you have to purchase certain pieces, or based upon their activity. You know, you pay a TPA to do something, and if they're successful, they may ask for more money. That is not the case across the board. So it's one of those things that you need to definitely evaluate what is being offered by those third-party administrators, because they're not all made equal. That's for sure.
Correct. Take a look at what's included in your enrollment fee for that program. And the same goes with the group retrospective program. Generally, your larger programs are going to offer more discounts and more accurate estimates as well. And much like group rating, the Ohio School Comp Program also has a group retro program that is administered by the OASBO and OSBA program. Okay, so this kind of breaks down a little bit what Tony was talking about on what we will look at when we're looking at refunds, assessments, and those survey dates that we mentioned that occur over the next 3 years after you enroll in the program. So let's say for the 2022 group retro timeline, your participation year is going to be January 1 through December 31 of 22. Then on December 31 of 23, that is your 12-month review. So at that time, the BWC is going to take a look at the claims cost incurred by the group as a whole, and that's when it'll be determined if you've got a refund or an assessment due. And then we have a side note here that those are typically issued in April following the group survey. Then we go on further to your second survey date, which occurs another year later. So this is your 24-month mark, 12/31 of 2024. And again, BWC will do the same thing, take a look at the performance, those claims costs during that 2022 policy year, and determine refunds or assessments at that point. And then your third and final survey will occur another year later. This is your 36-month mark at 12/31 of 25. Now we have a note here, refunds due may be applied to the premium reducing your next installment. So you could end up getting a refund directly from BWC, or that could be something that they apply to your policy as a credit. So always check your account balance before making your next installment payment, just to make sure that there isn't a credit that was applied and maybe you owe a little bit less than what you thought.
Yeah, and most schools, they pay annual. So in December of each year, they're paying their full premium for the upcoming calendar year or upcoming policy year. But there are a handful that work with different type of installment plans. Instead of one annual payment, they do monthly or quarterly. And that's what Rejeana is really addressing there. So if you are an installment payer, or basically any reason that you actually owe additional money at that time, BWC will apply that rebate to that outstanding balance. But along those same lines, if you are on installments, they will also pay those future installments for you as well. So in April, as the example, let's say you have your April premium due, but you also have upcoming premium installments for May, June, July, throughout the entire year. BWC will ultimately pre-bill all of those and apply that credit to those months as well before they send you any money back. I mean, there's a lot of advantages to be paying in advance, this not being one of them, but it makes the accounting for your treasurers, business managers, et cetera, a heck of a lot easier if that's just done one time. And this has a lot to do with that.
Yep. And we have a question here regarding the group retro refunds. Are those issued each year or just after the third survey? Those are issued every year. So after the first survey, a refund would come. After the second survey, you would get another refund. And then after the third, you would get your final refund. And they break that down over that first or over the 3-year period. But generally after the first survey is going to be your largest refund. Correct, Tony?
Yes. Part of that massaging of data that I talked about, you know, the claims losses, if you just think in general terms, claim costs for those minor medical, you know, I got the ouchie, I got my treatment and I'm back to work, that's fixed and it's finite. Well, when the Bureau is doing the evaluation, they're actually inflating that value by a certain percentage, and that decreases each of those 3 evaluations. So those costs naturally, just through this evaluation, continue to go down. On the flip side, though, there's the really costly claims where somebody might be off of work, maybe have some surgery, physical therapy, et cetera. They could be off an extensive amount of time, so that cost could continue to grow. So those 2 things offset, but the reality is on those more costly claims, the third-party administrator is looking for handicap relief, ways to reduce the cost but also not reducing the benefits to that injured worker. So there's mechanisms in place that we can utilize to keep that cost down, even though the cost is going up. So along the same lines as the medical example that I gave you, you know, cost is continuing to go up. We're reducing it through our individual processes, and then the BWC is multiplying it by a lower value come year 2 and year 3. So you would see a nice refund year 1, a little refund year 2, a little refund year 3, because those costs, especially on those larger, or I'm sorry, the minor ones, they're fixed, they're not growing, they're not doing anything.
All right, so now we're going to look at group retro back to back. So what happens if you were enrolled in group retro during the 2022 policy year, and then for next year, you decide you would like to enroll in group retro again? What is that back to back going to look like? So this is just a little chart kind of showing you the dates. So for your 2022 enrollment, you're still going to have your first survey date in 12/31 of 23. That is going to be looking at just your 2022 claims cost. Now, at that same time, you enrolled in the group retro program for the 2023 year. So the next year, it's going to be your second survey date for the 2022 participation and your first survey date for the 2023 participation. And at that time, if BWC determines a refund is due, then you're going to be looking at the refund that it's going to encompass both years. So you're going to have your second refund from the 2022 policy year in addition to your first refund from the 2023 policy year. And then it just keeps going. So in 2025, you're going to have your third refund from the 2022 rating year, and then your second refund from the 2023 rating year. And then again, your third and final survey date would be 12/31 of 26 for that 2023 participation year. So those refunds are just going to get added together as those are issued out.
And what we've seen over the years, you know, we've been doing this now for almost 13 years in the private sector and 12 for public with group retro. Once a employer goes to group retro, they almost always stay there. You know, unless there is some type of significant change in just philosophy, you know, we're no longer willing to take on that risk, or we no longer have any claims losses in our experience to where we can get the maximum savings available through group rating. We see schools move over to group retro, and that's where they stay. because of exactly what Rejeana is showing here. It's this continual stacking of rebates that happen to where every year you're getting a rebate that is now addressing 2, or if you continue in it, 3 years, and it just continues to compound on top of each other. So we've seen, you know, that when the program started way back in 2010 for schools, there was less than 25 schools in it. Fast forward to where we are today, there's over 200 that are participating in it. And it's pretty much the same every year, where we just continue to add a couple.
Now we're going to talk for a second about what happens if you're invited into both programs, group rating and group retro. These are the questions that we ask. What are the implications for your budget? You know, with one program, you're going to be paying your undiscounted premium, and the other program, you get that upfront discount. What's your risk tolerance? We talked about the risk that comes with the group retro program and the claims costs with the refund or the assessment. You know, take a look at your district and your claim history and what is your risk tolerance, and determine what's best for you there. And how much additional savings are offered through each program? Are you going to potentially see a much higher rebate through group retro than the upfront discount that you're going to receive under group rating, and determine, you know, which way you want to go there. How's the group retro program been performing? This is something that you can ask your third-party administrator regarding the program that they're looking at for you, and find out what's been the history of the group retro program. And then finally, are you able and willing to add additional programs for additional savings? Take a look at the requirements with each program, the risk, as we mentioned, and determine what's best for you. And I wanted to talk just for a second, because we talked about group retro, and if you enroll in group retro year after year, I just want to put out the scenario of, let's say you're in group retro and then you decide to go back to group rating. What's that going to look like for you? So under group retro, you're still going to have those evaluations that come out for the next 3 years. So let's say that you enrolled in group retro for 22 and 23, like we showed just on the previous slide, which I'll actually flip back to that. So let's say for both of these years, you were enrolled in group retro. And then for 2024, you decide that you want to go back to group rating to receive that upfront discount. What's that going to look like for you? So in the policy year of 2024, you would receive that group rating upfront discount, but you're still going to receive those refunds at the time period as mentioned on this slide. So 12/31/2024, you're still going to be receiving your refunds from the 2022 and 2023 retro participation years, in addition to your upfront discount that you received that year for the group rating program. And then that would continue until the refunds under the group retro program have been completed, assuming that you remain in group retro at that point. But I just wanted to point that out in case you would go back to that and wondered what that would look like as far as your refunds. Do you have anything to add about that, Tony?
No, I mean, each year, you know, it is annual decision on, again, I mentioned that, you know, your risk tolerance may change. Group rating may actually be more advantageous to you. I mean, your third-party administrator should be presenting the options to you. It's not just a blind decision where you pick which one. They should be able to advise you on what may be the best option for the district, and then you can make the decision, or obviously the board gets to make that call, but ultimately the treasurer will present based upon their information that they've evaluated the options. This is what we believe is the best option, and a lot of that advice is coming from the third-party administrator, that partner of the school district. Now, each one of them, each program does have a different deadline. Ultimately, when that's filed to the state, which I think, yep, there it is. So obviously, that could come into play as well. Group rating deadline being in May, if the quotes just went out, and they did, obviously there's a shorter timetable to make that decision than it is with group retro. So if you missed the deadline in May for group rating, or maybe it wasn't even an option to you based upon prior losses, group retro is where you're ultimately going to end up.
And a little bit more time for group retro with that enrollment deadline at the end of July. And it's always the last business day of the month.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. We're making decisions today with that May 31st deadline for something that will ultimately impact the district January 1st. It is that far out in advance because the Bureau needs to make sure that they set the rates appropriately, get those bills out, and they need to make sure that they have all of the policies correctly classified for when those billings go out. Just takes time.
So as you're weighing out both programs, our best recommendation, just do the math. Take a look at your projected savings under the program. Are they upfront or deferred? Which do you prefer? Administration time and effort is something else to take into consideration, and also the program implementation cost, and just figure out, which one is going to be best for your situation as you're looking ahead down the road for your cost saving options. And I'm going to turn it over to Tony to talk about the COVID-19 claims and the impact of those on your district.
Thanks. No, seriously, thank you, Rejeana. So I realize that we are running short on time, so I'm going to go through this real quick, but because I do want to give the opportunity for any Q&A. So if you have some, please go ahead and start typing that in, and we'll address it once I cover COVID-19 in the workforce. So generally speaking, these types of diseases, and think of the common flu, stuff like that, that is not a compensable claim under workers' compensation. You got the sniffles, you got sick. It's very hard to tie that to a workplace exposure. Workers' comp is there for somebody that gets injured or gets some type of occupational disease while working. Those types of diseases are very, very tough to pinpoint to where you got it. COVID-19 kind of changed things where BWC did start to allow those types of claims. But again, it was very, very difficult to prove where you contracted COVID. So in general terms, there's very few positions, if you will, or job codes that are at a greater risk of getting the disease than the general public. Think of first responders, healthcare, etc. So if you think in the school district, there's really, in my personal opinion, one person or maybe one department that is at a greater risk than anybody else, and that's your nurses. Every time Susie or Beth or Mark or Ralph or anybody gets the sniffles, they get to go see the nurse. So that person is constantly in contact with individuals that are presenting some type of symptoms. Everybody else, that's kind of just general day-to-day stuff. You're around people that may have symptoms, may not. So it's very difficult to prove that your teacher or your bus driver or superintendent got COVID while working. So there's a Q&A, and there's a whole bunch of questions that go into ultimately making the decision, is this compensable under workers' comp? Well, since this was a change and rate making is based upon prior losses and expectations of future losses, COVID is kind of this anomaly that BWC wanted to pay if allowable, but they didn't want it to influence future rates because hopefully it's a once in a lifetime type of event. So this past year, back in 2021, BWC made the decision that any claims that were during that state of emergency, yes, we will still pay for them, we being BWC, if it was allowed, but they would not impact the employer, or in this case, the school district's rates. So, I mean, there's some statistics on there, but bottom line, if it was the date of injury, or in this case, the date of when that disease was contracted, if it fell between those two dates, BWC would still pay for it, but they would not charge the school district in the experience. After that date, yes, it is still payable if it meets all of the prior qualifications that I kind of mentioned, but those claims are few and far between, thankfully. And we're waiting to see if BWC will extend that exclusion period. But for right now, if the date of disease is after July 2nd, yes, that is a compensable claim. But they realized, hey, this is a once in a lifetime event. We need to exclude it because we don't want to penalize employers for something that is, way, way, way outside of the normal quote unquote safety parameters. So I know that was a lot of information. I believe there's a couple of links that you can go to find out more if you're really interested with BWC and their compliance and their process for BWC. So I know we're getting close to up against the clock, so I just kind of want to open this up for any type of questions that you may have.
Hey, and by the way, just so everybody's aware, you can actually unmute to ask the question right now as well.
And I do have to say hi to Susie. I see you over there, Susie. Good to see you again. All right, hearing none. Ralph, would you like to land the plane, please?
Well, yes. And thank you so much for your time, by the way. Rejeana and Tony, we appreciate every time that you come and present. And I know it is a lot of information for everybody, especially in a half an hour on an early Tuesday morning, but we appreciate you being here so much and trying to get through the mud so that everybody has a good understanding of how their rating actually works. It's pretty challenging, so we really appreciate it. And again, by the way, if your questions don't, sometimes I know I'm the same way, your questions may formulate in your head later. You can reach out to Tony and Rejeana and they'll happily answer those questions. So thank you both so much. And did you have any last parting words?
Just continue to, lean on those smarter folks, the business managers, the treasurers that are ultimately making this call to present to the board for their approval. They're doing a lot of vetting. So continue to listen to their advice, and because hopefully that is being fed to them, and it's, coming to the decision of all parties, TPA, the school, and then the board.
And enjoy your spring break for those of you that might be on spring break this week. And thanks for joining us on your spring break.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you both again so much, and everybody have a great rest of your day. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.